So I'll introduce the Minister as she's walking across, if she doesn't mind. So also a feminist theologian, a member of the Human Rights Commission in its former life, as Anne-Louise said, interviewed and accepted by Gráinne Healy into the position of CEO of the National Women's Council. She was nominated by Enda Kenny, the Taoiseach, to the 24th Seanad. With her Seanad nomination, she was in 2011, she was the first openly lesbian member of the Oireachtas and the first member in a recognised same-sex relationship. She was the first lesbian TD, and by her own reckoning, the world's, is it 32 lesbian to be elected to Parliament? And now she is a cabinet minister and she's in charge of our children. What about that?
Thank you, Denise. Thank you so much. And as Anne-Louise said, and for both of us, it's fantastic to be here and to acknowledge the great work in terms of the organizing and the people who did that. Just to take up then from where Anne-Louise left off, in terms of the marriage, obviously we came back. We came back to Ireland. And in returning to Ireland, it brought us back to reality. There was no national organization willing to campaign on the issue of marriage, and others in our situation still closeted. It was clear that we would have to, at least initially, go it alone. And in early 2004, as Anne-Louise indicated, we started to here we're going the legal route, and our legal team devised a strategy. And our strategy was that to apply to the revenue commissioners to recognize our marriage and request a change of tax status. And if they accepted, we had won. And if they did not, we were heading to the High Court. Upon receiving a negative response, our lawyers set to work immediately. Nothing prepared us, though, for waking up on the morning of November 8th of 2004, when our application to the High Court was all over the RTE's Morning Ireland, and after featuring on the front page of the Irish Times. Headline writers sent the message worldwide that the battle for marriage equality in Ireland was on. The court decided, yes, there was a case to answer, but this was just a prelude. Weeks and months of huge public support came to a crashing halt when with another Irish Times front page that the news was not good. The government at cabinet level had discussed our case to decide to challenge us. And the first time I walked into that cabinet room and I looked at that big table, that's what I thought of, those people sitting around that day. Anyhow, the full gravity of what we were about to take on that day hit us. It took some time to regain our energy and our drive. A fundraiser at a packed mansion house, remember that, some of you? Reminded us of the enormous gift of solidarity. And 4.5 years after we discovered Ireland's discriminatory tax system, our legal challenge began. Judgment Day was the 15th of December, 2006. We arrived early at the forecourts to be greeted by family and friends. The judgment is 138 pages, but in reality it was over in 10 minutes. We lost. Despite the disappointment and hurt, we lodged our case with the Supreme Court as we reached for hope. I guess that's what you do all the time in campaigns for change, don't you? Our case remained active, and we were ready to take that option until the prospect of the marriage equality referendum came into view. So I'm going to say a little bit more about that political venture as the politician now of the couple. Anne-Louise talked a lot about tried to share some of our roots, our foundations, and we did that purposefully, although we are aware some of you are very familiar with our story. Our foundations and our vision as a feminist couple who believe in equality for all. It's our core. It's at the very heart of our personal journey to marriage equality, and I suggest Ireland's journey to marriage equality. Campaigners in the United States, and we have some of them here, which is absolutely marvelous, some of our friends and colleagues, say that, and you've heard from them already, I know, I know you've spoken about this too, say that the first step to success is to be able to tell the story of self. It's normally the very reason for campaigns' existence or personal involvement in a campaign. So that's why. By being comfortable in telling your own story, you convince family and friends and neighbors and so many others. And Anne Louise has given you some of our story of self. There are many others in the room today who also have a story to tell, have told their stories. Grania, Healy, Denise, Charlton, their partners, Meninia Griffith, all of our friends, many of the members of the Marriage Equality Board here with us today, and campaigners. So, but through each other, the story of self became the story of us. And of course, we didn't know it at the time, but that's what happened, albeit organically in our context. And that story of us led to the establishment of marriage equality. We were feminists, looking for equality because it is our right. We were not going to accept a watered-down marriage. We were seeking what is right and fair and just. And like so many other successful organizations or movements, it's quite hard to pin down a moment where it started. But suffice to say, I think that the legal case was the genesis. And in February of 2008, what had been a close support base of friends and feminists and supporters gathered around our kitchen table or our dining room tables, which was for a number of months and period of time the Cal Advocacy Initiative, transformed into the Marriage Equality Organization. We were a not-for-profit national single-issue grassroots advocacy organization. Our goal, was our goal then? To achieve equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people in Ireland through the extension of civil marriage rights to same-sex couples. Now it was about the story of us. And our mission was supported primarily by the work and experience of people working with us in relation to our Cal case, our legal battle before the courts. And there were many legal arguments to that case, but the one that I want to single out today, because I think is most prevalent, it was this: that everyone should have the human right to marry the person they choose to love. I can still remember the day that one of our lawyers came into one of our many, many countless meetings and said, that's it. You have the right to marry the person you choose to love. And that legal argument in a public interest law case eventually became a prime public communication message in the Yes campaign, changing Yes campaign during the marriage referendum in Ireland. There were also public pieces of work dating back to the time of our case, a report by the Law Reform Commission on cohabitants and findings of the Oireachtas Committee on the Constitution. Those findings were in favor of legal recognition of same-sex relationships for marriage like privileges. It was a mixed bag, though, accepting marriage equality as the only true equality measure, but favoring civil partnership as the only possible option in legislation. Anne Louise and I were very clear on this, that we did not want some second-class marriage. We will not ask others for permission to marry, and full equality is the only acceptable outcome. We wouldn't ask others. We had to change our mind on that. That's all of many of us did. Rania, Denise, and so many others sharing our views. So, yeah, of course, and I'm sure you've spoken about this, maybe in terms of this movement or other movements, but it would be dishonest not to tell you that these were difficult times in our community. While others favored civil partnership and what we viewed at the time as a piecemeal approach, there were those of us who would only accept one goal. Of course, you're aware that civil partnership did become a reality, and in fairness, for many couples, it did overcome obstacles, and I'm thinking of immigration issues, inheritance, and other areas of law. But for us, it was not enough. It was never going to be enough. Political changes, a new government with Labour in power, Joan Burton, Eamon Gilmore, Pat Rabbitte, sharing power. In fairness, the appointment of Alan Chatter, Francis Fitzgerald, who some of you know so well, but others will meet later, all brought new hope. It seems like so long ago now, but in June of 2011, the establishment of a constitutional convention reignited our campaign, even though the Marriage Equality Organization, with leadership of Grania, Denise, and Meninia, and Andrew, and so many others, kept that alive, but that's what reignited the campaign. That's part of the story. Through that mechanism, we were able to reassure nervous politicians. I never imagined, really at that stage I'd be where I am today, but that the support was there for a referendum, and a referendum would pass. We shared our stories, and the stories struck which struck a chord with fellow citizens. And I remember that day, the day I went into see the Taoiseach. I was senator at the time. And I asked him, could I see him? And I hadn't had too many private meetings with him, but I said, you know what, I really want to talk to you about this, about the Constitutional Convention. And I went in and I sat down, and it was just the two of us in his big room. And I said, you know, Taoiseach, one of the things that Anne Louise and I have been doing over the last number of years, in a way that's really important and integral to, I think, this journey, is that we just tell our story. And so I looked and I said, Taoiseach, you know, why don't you tell your story? People of Ireland would love to hear that story. Talk about the story of your journey on this and where you've been and where you're going, and that would make a difference. And I think, you know, as we know, eventually he did. Those stories were on the foundation on which the referendum was built, and it's a model which I'm sure will deliver further much needed social change in our country, not the least of which is the issue around the Eighth Amendment, which we're currently in, and many of you here, I know, are gathered to think about how to move forward in relation to that campaign, that movement, and how we can be successful in that as well. There's no doubt in my mind, though, going back to this other, that the citizens, the Constitutional Convention, secured the road to marriage equality. I have that experience. We all have that experience. It's largely, so the basis of that, that's what I root my analysis and judgment, my political judgment in relation to the next big campaign. You'll have heard, I'm sure, you've heard, your days have been about the grand coalition building that it sparked. Yes, equality. Yes, equality. Yes, equality. Yes, equality. Reinvigorating our community. The emergence of new allies, and not just in politics. The need to work together. One voice, agreed messaging, culminating in that fantastic day in Dublin Castle. And the theme today is the significance of that result. The significance, in one way, there's really one thing we could say. If you were to say, what's the significance? The significance is first and foremost in family homes across Ireland. That's where it is. Our marriages are equal. They're celebrated, and they're rejoiced by our family and friends and neighbors. It's in the homes. It's when families gather around the table with their daughters or their sons or their fathers or their mothers or their nieces or their nephews. But it's also significant for wider changes, too. On Monday, I was in Castlebar, Mayo, with Marina Tuffy, who's there in one of the tables there. And she brought three beautiful young, I don't know, are they in their early 20s or late teens? 18. Lesbians. And they sat down on a sofa. And you know who sat next to them? Enda Kenny. I was with him there in Castlebar. We were visiting doing my day job, children and young people centers. But he said, no, I want to come and meet. Marina got volunteer with one of the great coordinator of one of the Belong To groups there. And there we sat on the sofas, chatting. He was as comfortable as ever. They were a little nervous, I think, but eventually after the few minutes passed, having just extraordinary conversations about what we'd all done together, and particularly with the Young Women's Leadership. Would any political leader, or even Enda Kenny himself, have ever imagined him doing that, even 2 or 3 years earlier? I will never forget that image. That was just a couple of days ago. And I understand that the kind of story of what happened in Mayo and Castlebar is here, is that right? In a photo exhibition, as part of your time together. Of course, those of you, just going back to the days and the success itself, those of you who are on Twitter would have seen the news result across the world explode across the globe. Another significance, it was hugely significant that Catholic Ireland was the first country to introduce marriage equality by popular vote. Our cultural foundations have been excavated and reformed. So it's been a huge journey for us personally, for LGBT people and their families and friends across the country, and for Ireland. I think that there were, if I were to say, I think that there were three roots in this movement, this campaign: the courts, the lawmakers, the people. And the referendum result, I think, was a seismic shift of the cultural foundations of Ireland. And the impact of such change only drops slowly. And the ripple effect moves into streams and rivers and oceans that we can't even see right now. Whether inside or outside the courtroom, the changes involve the enormous, effective, intelligent, and emotional mobilization of our people. For Anne Louise and myself, it was a privilege to be there at the start and to celebrate its finish. So many friends and colleagues along the way. Earlier this year in City Hall, the President of Ireland, members of the Irish government, our family, and many other friends joined us for a very moving ceremony. We not only renewed our marriage vows in the City Hall in Dublin, we brought our marriage home. And that is the significance of what has unfolded in this country for the past 2 decades.